with all the sports news you need. Live.
Good afternoon. It's Sunday afternoon. It's 3 o'clock and welcome to the locker room here on Live Radio and Independence Live Radio. My name is Graham Duthie. I'm pretty sure you all know that by now. You will notice that today I don't have Michael here. What a shame. He was at a park watching it. So at the last minute, I've called and I'm more than capable. You all know him. And if you don't, why not? He's the host of Thursday Night Your Country Show and also the host of the wonderful one, and he's not paid me to say this, Big Saturday Show. It is Mr. James E. James, again, thank you for joining me. And how are you this fine afternoon?
It's an absolute pleasure to be on with you once again, Graham. I'm absolutely fine. Considering I would have been much better had the game at Rugby Park gone the way that I thought it was going to go. But I'm happy enough, and that's a poor excuse from Michael, if you don't mind me saying. You know, the fact that he was going there. He's got a mobile phone, for God's sake. You know what I mean? They must have Wi-Fi down there, surely. I know it's in the deepest, darkest Ayrshire, but
I would use it for, to be honest. But before we get into the games for this afternoon and yesterday, there was some games that played this afternoon. I'll give you the scores from those. It was Aberdeen 2, Hamilton 1, Spartans 2, Motherwell 2, and Partick Thistle Rangers 5. There are two other games this afternoon. Glasgow United at 4 o'clock, and the big one, which kicks off at 4:10 and is Glasgow City Women against Celtic. So we will keep you updated on that when that game kicks off. We're on until 5 o'clock today, so as well, get all your thoughts in the games that we've played this. But let us start. Now, I'm not going to start with Derby because Hearts got beat. I'll leave that till later. We will start with the game from this afternoon at Rugby Park. It finished Kilmarnock 1, Celtic 4. Now, James, going to this game, Celtic, looking at that lineup, they didn't have Carter Vickers. There was no Hatate, there was no Abada, and there was no... When you saw that Celtic lineup, were you happy with it? Any major surprises in there for you?
I wouldn't say I had been disappointed, that players had been left out, the likes of Carter Vickers, Jota, etc. It was a good opportunity to give some other players, a chance. And in all honesty, Kobayashi, I really don't think he's as much of a step down at this point in time from Carter Vickers. He's not played many games since he's came into the club, but he's a very solid and dependable defender, and I thought he had an excellent game today. Haksabanovic, again, I think he's just been kind of biding his time, and I think given an extended run in the team, he would be an absolute revelation. And I must say that Iwata was just... boy, absolutely brilliant, And I was thinking to myself when I saw the teams, I thought to myself, do you know what? Never in a million years as a youngster growing up and following Celtic would I have ever thought I would have seen 4 Japanese players turning out for a Celtic team. And that just shows you how the game has changed in all that time.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of Kilmarnock, they have had a very poor run away from home. They've not won away from home, but at home, they've actually been okay. And I think they started the game all right. They tried to play on the front foot, but when you're playing against Celtic, if you make a mistake, and no disrespect to teams like St John's, if you make a mistake, you might not get punished. Kilmarnock make a really poor mistake. Fraser Murray's got the ball on halfway line. He tries to pass the ball back. It's a poor pass. And when you give a ball away like that to a guy like Kyogo, you're going to be punished. And to be fair to Kyogo, great finish. He's got a lot to do. He's on his own. It's a great little finish. 29 goals this season, and it's a perfect start for Celtic.
Yeah, absolutely. And, I completely agree with you. Murray, you can say all you want about, he made a mistake, and he certainly did make a mistake, but I think as well you've got to acknowledge the sharpness of the Celtic players, that as soon as that mistake was made, they were on it. Whereas Kilmarnock, certainly in the first half, when the Celtic players made a mistake, they didn't benefit from at Kilmarnock because they weren't quick enough. They improved enough in the second half to get on top of that. But that first half, it was just it was fantastic to watch. If you're a Celtic supporter, it was fantastic to watch. And I must say that I was very, very disappointed that large numbers of relatively small crowd from the Kilmarnock side were leaving, so quickly. To me, that's not a fan or a supporter of a football club. You stick with them through thick and thin. When I used to go to the games, I never left the game until the final whistle actually went.
Yeah, I mean, I think if you're Derek McInnes, I'm sure that the one thing you would have said to your team before the game was concede early. To lose that goal after 6 minutes, and then you're thinking, right, can Kilmarnock get back into this game? And after 11 minutes, Celtic make it 2. Now, I said this to Michael last week, and I'll say it to you as well. I might have said this in the group chat. I think since he's came in to take over from Juranovic, Alistair Johnson's been excellent. Now, it's his ball in from the right-hand side. Really good ball in. Again, Kilmarnock don't defend it, and Maeda has a really simple head at the end. But Alistair Johnston has been outstanding for Celtic since he's come in.
Absolutely, he's been such a revelation. I mean, I was a big fan of Juranovic, when he came to Celtic. And when there was talk about him going, I was like, oh my goodness, we've got this terrific right back. Yeah, Anthony Ralston's a good deputy, but, I couldn't think who we could possibly get in that might even be as good as, if not better. But Johnson is just literally, and as the saying goes, he's hit the ground running. Ever since his first game in the Rangers Celtic game at the New Year, he has just gone on from strength to strength.
You spoke a couple of times on the show before about Daizer Maeda. Again, it's another good finish from him. What do you make of Maeda?
I think Maeda is a very, very good player. I know a lot of people, when he came to Celtic, a lot of the chat was about, he was a goal scorer. But unlike a lot of supporters, whenever a foreign player comes into my club, I do a bit of research to find out about them, especially if I don't know anything about them. And let's be honest, the guy's coming from Japan. We're not really going to know a huge amount about them because we don't actually see much Japanese football on television. So I went away and I did a little bit of research, and I very quickly learned that, yes, the guy could score goals, but his other attributes were probably the strengths that were the reason that he was being brought into Celtic. He is literally, running on ever-ready batteries. He just has this amazing energy to get up and down the park. He doesn't really get phased. If he gets knocked over, he kind of bounces back up again, and he's off again. And the fact that he can score goals is, for me, it's a bit of an added bonus compared to everything else he does.
Yeah, I mean, Kilmarnock really struck as they got foothold in the game. And I said in the group chat that everything that they were going to score. And they added to that 17 minutes. Matt O'Reilly, again, it's really poor defending. Fraser Murray, who had an absolutely terrible game, tries to hit the ball out. It falls at O'Reilly, but again, it's a very good finish from Matt O'Reilly.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, Matt O'Reilly this season has kind of suffered a little bit because of how well Hatate has been playing, and then obviously Aaron White coming in, especially after the World Cup. Aaron White, had been absolutely excellent. When you think back to last year, when Matt O'Reilly came in January of last year, he was very much an ever-present in that first 11 for Celtic, and you could see why. He's such a super midfield player. He's very intelligent. He can take a goal. But again, it's the other parts of his game that are important. He gets his head up, he looks around, he sees the pass, he makes the pass. If he can't make the pass, and I know, funnily enough, this is a point that I've been reading, and I know a lot of Celtic supporters will probably not like this, but I've been reading Brendan Rodgers' autobiography. And it's very interesting that he talks about, in the early days, the fans would get frustrated when they seen a player passing the ball back instead of going forward all the time. But if you look at the Celtic teams since Brendan Rodgers, They have all done that. When there's not a forward pass, let's go back and restart. And that is really what it's all about, and Matt O'Reilly does that so well. He looks up, he sees there's a ball on, he plays the ball. If there's not a ball on, he assesses very, very quickly what other options are available to him. And if one of those options, or the only option, is to go back the way to somebody else to restart, he's not afraid to do it. Whereas some players would think, I've got to play that ball forward. And then it ends up, they lose possession because of it.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Celtic would get the chance to score a fourth goal after 21 minutes, which sounds mental, but a poor challenge from Christian Deutsch on Greg Taylor. And even before he takes the penalty, Kyogo's got the little smile on his face, and you think Kyogo's going to score this, hits the post. Again, I think most folk, probably like yourself, were expecting Kyogo to score that, to be honest.
Well, you know what? You would probably put Baker House on, him getting that goal, absolutely. Although I must say, I personally thought it was in the soft variety, the penalty. You're going to take it all day long, of course you are, but the contact wasn't really that bad. Yes, it was enough for him to go down, but, I've seen players, getting knocked over in penalty areas, sometimes with a bit more robustness than that, and nothing being given. So, it swings and roundabouts. But I suppose when you're kind of like on the rough end of the stick, so to speak, things are not going to go your way. And I would like to think that had it gone to VAR, then the VAR decision would probably have been a penalty as well. But with VAR, you can never tell, can you?
Oh, don't get me started on that. I'm honestly I want to bin VAR, to be honest. But it wouldn't really for Celtic to get that fourth goal. You've mentioned earlier, Matt O'Reilly again, another good finish. And I think at that point, 4-0 up, and I said before, Celtic hitting against United, and it sucks in that first half. I thought that was going to be exactly the same again.
Yeah, it definitely at that point in time, it definitely could have gone on to be like double figures potentially, And even though Kilmarnock get a goal back before half time, you would have still expected, there to be far too much to come from Celtic for it not to be, to use an old expression, end up as a cricket score, But yeah, it was just at 4-0, you're just thinking to yourself, maybe they should actually decide to call this game off to save embarrassment.
I'm going to be honest, right? I kind of always feel sorry for a player if they get taken off early, not because of injury, but because they're playing. And after half an hour, Derek McInnes makes the decision to take off Fraser Murray and take off Christian Deutsch. Now, we heard him after the game, and he said the reason Deutsch was taken off because he wanted the next midfield. That's fine. But he did say he took Murray off because it was a poor game. Again, I feel sorry for when that happens, because what must that do to their confidence? Yes, it's having a bad game, but to get taken off after half an hour, and let's be honest, he could have to be taken off after half an hour. I always think is very, very harsh.
Well, to be honest, I was a bit surprised that he was making the substitutions when he did, because it's not very often you see that happen in games. I have to say, because generally speaking, managers will usually give a player, until at least half time to see if they can kind of get themselves sorted out, because there's lots of different reasons why he might not be on it that particular day. And if it is down to an injury, whether it's an injury he's carrying or whatever, then it's much more understandable. But as you say, to be pulled off when, to all intents and purposes, there isn't really anything wrong with you physically, that has got to hurt.
I mean, that first half, we'll get to the kill goal in a minute, but obviously that first half, Celtic were very dominant. But were you surprised by how easy Kilmarnock made that first half?
I was. Even though, we had beaten them 5-0 earlier in the season, at Rugby Park, and it was a very easy game, I have to say. You know, I remember the game well, and it was a very easy game. And again, it was a game that probably could have been a bigger score, but for whatever reason, it wasn't. And I honestly thought that Kilmarnock would make it a wee bit tougher this time, because over the course of the season, since the early weeks in the season, they have improved, especially at home. As you said at the top of the show, away from home, their record is pretty woeful, but they have been pretty good when they've been playing at Rugby Park, although they don't call it Rugby Park anymore, do they? I'm still using a very old-fashioned name for the place, I believe. The stadium, it's not a stadium of light, but it is
all the one thing that
stadium.
nobody expected.
Aye, I mean, you know, and generally speaking,
the one thing.
I mean, generally speaking, Derek McInnes's teams, even when he was at Aberdeen, generally speaking, his teams from a defensive standpoint were always pretty good. But certainly in that first half today, from a defensive point, Kilmarnock just were not there. You know, it was almost as if they didn't have anybody on the pitch at times.
I think the best surprise to anybody in that first half was that Kilmarnock actually score. And as we mentioned in the group chat, very unlike Callum McGregor. He gets cut out by Liam Donnelly. He has a couple of goals at it. Joe Hart makes a couple of saves, but Donnelly scores. Do you think that Postecoglou's going to be very disappointed at the way they lost that goal?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, to be honest, I actually couldn't believe it. Even though I was watching it, you know, I couldn't believe what was happening. It was a bit like watching one of those old silent movies with the Keystone Cops, and there's probably a lot of young people who might watch this, won't know what I'm talking about, but they were silent film characters, the Keystone Cops, and everything they did was always a complete disaster. And right from the moment when Callum took, I think maybe he took a touch too much, and that allowed, you know, Donnelly to get in on him. But yeah, one of those rare things, you know, with a player like Callum McGregor, who is generally speaking has such huge standards and very high standards. It was a lapse in concentration, and then the defence just melted away, basically, you know. So yeah, all credit to Donnelly for getting his goal. You know, he worked for it, he got it, and he got the opportunity. It looked like it had gone past him, and then he got another chance and he put it in the net. So, you know, well done to the lad. But it was just a real comic cuts moment.
It was half time. It was 4-1 to Celtic. Half time comes. You're expecting Celtic to come out the second half and score more. Probably one of the, I don't know if it's a surprise to me, it might be a surprise to you. Came off at half time, and Celtic in the stand was career manager Jurgen Klinsmann, who was obviously watching O. What do you think he would have made of O in that 45-minute second half that he was on?
I would like to think that he would have been sufficiently impressed enough to think, I need to see this boy again. He didn't get too much service. And to be honest, I think there was a couple of times in the game when he probably should have had a foul, where Ash Taylor was either pulling him back or, you know, quite blatantly pushing him off, you know, when he was trying to get to a ball. But nothing was done about it. He had one possibly decent opportunity when the ball was flashed across the goal, and I can't remember who the Kilmarnock defender was, who probably just did enough to put him off, you know, but it would have been a proper stretch if he had gotten the ball. He might have got his goal. But no, I think Klinsmann would have been reasonably pleased with what he saw, because he is still a young player. So, you know, very much from Jurgen Klinsmann's point of view, I think it would have been very much, let's see if this boy might have the potential to, you know, to get it up into the national team.
I put in the group chat that the second half was a bit of a non-event. A lot happening. Chambers had a decent header, well saved by Joe Hart. Again, second half, Kilmarnock got a bit more competitive. Celtic, as you'd mentioned, dropped off the pace a little bit. but Celtic still had a couple of chances. You mentioned that chance, right-hand side, just can't. Starfelt heads over the bar.
Yeah.
Second half, was it a case of Celtic dropped off the pace second half, or do you have to give credit to Kilmarnock for making it more competitive than
Well, it's a little bit of both, to be honest, Graham. I honestly do believe that the Celtic players did kind of take their foot off the pedal a little bit. As I said in the chat, they'd taken their foot off the pedal that much, it was almost as if they'd stopped. But you've got to give credit to the Kilmarnock players who did kind of pull themselves up and decide to make a game of it. But they just didn't have anybody good enough or sharp enough to really punish Celtic, when they got into those areas. Joe Hart, for all he had nothing to do, in the bulk of the game, it shows his great mental fortitude and concentration that, when he did need to make saves, he made saves.
There was, as expected, a lot of changes, and I think the biggest one for me, old Ben Summers, comes to the bench for his Celtic debut. I mean, as a young player, for so much confidence will that give him that he comes off bench? Celtic have won the game. He didn't maybe had one or two touches, but what a big lift that would be for Celtic.
Absolutely. Do you know what I think for any young player, regardless of who the team is that they're with, to make their full debut, for whatever team, it's got to be a great moment for them. Obviously, if you're a fan of that particular club, then it's going to mean a great deal more to you. I was more interested, I have to say, in Rocco Vata being introduced. I remember his dad, when his dad played for Celtic, and he was a fine defender in his day. I was quite pleased to see young Rocco getting on, because I've seen him a couple of times. I've seen a couple of games with the B team, and I've seen the young lad playing for them a couple of times, and I've been impressed by him. I can honestly say that the young lad Summers, apart from his being introduced today, I don't really recall him. He probably has played for the B team when I've watched it, but I probably was concentrating more on Rocco Vata than anybody else. So, it did kind of go past, but he did do well when he came on, and it was a perfect opportunity, for Ange Postecoglou to introduce a couple of young players. They've obviously been working with the first team before, because obviously they bring them into the first team setup and let them train with the older guys and the first team players and stuff like that. So he's obviously impressed him enough when he's been watching them in training to think there could be an opportunity for this lad. Let's have him on the bench.
Let's get some comments from the manager, Celtic manager, Ange Postecoglou first. Our first half was outstanding, probably as well as we've played all year. Second half felt a bit sloppy and never got to rhythm. Overall, knowing the challenge here today, really pleased. O'Reilly's contribution has been all year. Good for him to get a couple of goals. Our football was brilliant. Everyone was king. Our finishing composure, apart from the penalty, excellent. Disappointing for Kyogo that he couldn't get his goal from the penalty. I'm sure more will come, and I'm pretty sure that you would agree with pretty much most of what Postecoglou said there.
Yeah, I think whenever you listen to Ange when he's being interviewed after the game, and I know most of the time it is positive, but he's very forthright, and I think he's very honest, because if the team haven't performed particularly well, he will say that, and if a player's done very well, he'll give him praise, and if he's not perhaps done as well, he won't blast them, but he'll mention, that maybe he was off his pace or whatever, So I think he's a very honest manager, and I think when you listen to his comments, unless you're very biased, you're going to have to agree with a lot of what he said.
Yeah, and Tim McInnes, he says, we helped with the first goal. Some of that type of decision-making was really not great. It's not what we want to see. We were passive after that. Clearly, we need to stop the bleeding. We made the changes and I thought we were instantly better. The second half was exactly how I wanted us to be. I'm determined to get a Kilmarnock club who can beat Celtic and can do so much better than what we showed today. For the first time being our fight isn't that. Our fight is to make sure we stay in the league. We've got 6 games against teams we know we can win against. Now, where he says, I'm determined to get a Kilmarnock team at this club that can beat Celtic, it's going to be very hard to do because every team in the league is trying to do that. And you cannot, as I said there, you cannot gift a Celtic goals that they have today.
No, absolutely. And I mean, you've got to laud them, for saying that, because let's be honest, if you manage a football team, right, you've got to want to beat the teams round about you, even the teams that are, in inverted commas, better than you, because the club has more money, therefore they can invest in a better quality of player, for instance. But for you as a manager, and also for the players on the field, it's an opportunity for them to show that they can actually stand toe-to-toe with these better players and, if not beat them, at least compete with them on a fairly even field. Because at the end of the day, I've always felt that football, it's 11 people against 11 people, and you've got as much chance if you're in a small team of winning a game as you have of being in a big team as winning a game. It's the mistakes that you make or don't make that will determine what happens. And that's what happened to Kilmarnock in that first half. There was some fairly basic mistakes got made and they got punished for it. If they had done so against, I don't know, say maybe St Johnstone or possibly Ross County, they might not have been punished the same. But the potential for that punishment would always be there if they make those kind of basic mistakes.
Yeah, I mean, Celtic now are 2 wins away from the title, but the title's, let's be honest, been done for weeks. They play Motherwell at home next week. You've got to assume that that'll be a comfortable win for Celtic next week.
Well, do you know what? Based on how Motherwell had been playing up until yesterday, I probably would have thought, this could be quite a tight game. But if Motherwell play against Celtic next weekend the way that they played against Dundee United yesterday, then they'll get absolutely slaughtered, And I've been saying pretty much most of the season, I've been saying to people that I can see Celtic coming up against somebody at some point before the end of the season and literally battering them. I know they did 9 against Dundee United, but I can see them coming up against somebody and actually going into double figures because there are times when everything clicks for that Celtic team. To all you Hearts fans, I'm laughing at his comment. I'm not laughing at Hearts Football Club, okay? I'm laughing at Graham's comment there. Oh, dearie me.
In terms of Kilmarnock, their last game before the split, they take on St Mirren. On you go.
Well, do you know what? St Mirren, I know technically speaking, they had a bad day at the office yesterday. Although they scored 2 stunning goals, which obviously we will talk about when we're talking about that game. But I could see St Mirren damaging Kilmarnock in the next game because I think St Mirren are a good team. And I think Stephen Robinson has taken what was potentially a team that could have been in a relegation dogfight this season. When he came in, he has taken them and moulded them into something that is not an easy team to beat. Whether it's at home or whether they're away from home. They're a good side, St Mirren.
Looking at the bottom of that table, James, Ross County at bottom on 27, Kilmarnock second bottom on 28, Dundee United third bottom on 28, St Johnstone are 9th on 32. If you're a Kilmarnock fan, are you very, very worried that you could be in the Championship next season, or do you think they can get out of this?
Well, I think I don't know if I'd be worried that they would be in the Championship next season. I'd maybe be more worried that they could end up in, the relegation dogfight and possibly have to go through the playoff. I think Kilmarnock have the players there who should be in the Premier League. not necessarily top 6 players, but they're a team that should probably be in the Premier League anyway. If they go back down to the Championship, and I know the Championship is a difficult league to get away from because there's some super teams in there. I would expect Kilmarnock to, if not get immediate promotion if they went down, to certainly be in there to have the chance of playing a playoff and getting back into the Premier League again.
Absolutely. Let's move on to the games from yesterday, and unfortunately, let's start for the Edinburgh Derby. I was going to put this long, get it out of the way quickly. So Hibs went into this game on the back of 4 straight defeats. Hearts went in on the back of 6 defeats out of 7, but knowing that we had basically been 9 games unbeaten in Edinburgh Derby, the game at Easter Road. I'll get on to Hearts very shortly because I want to ask James his thoughts about Roman Nielsen. But in terms of Hibernian, lucky yesterday, they thoroughly deserved to win the game. Lee Johnson got his team up for it, which he should be for any Derby game. But watching the game yesterday, James, Hibs, apart from the fact they only got 1 goal, they could have easily had 3 or 4 more. They were very good yesterday. They had a game plan, they stuck to it, and they were the far better team throughout that game.
Yeah, I mean, obviously I didn't see the game live, and I have to say that, in my humble opinion, I would have rather seen Hearts and Hibs live on Sky than Celtic and Kilmarnock, because I think there was more at stake for that game than there was for the game today. But that's a discussion for another time. But yeah, I mean, watching the highlights, I definitely felt that Hibs were far too dominant for Hearts. And I know you've mentioned quite a few times, on the group chat and stuff, like, how badly Hearts have been playing and stuff like that. And I must admit, I was quite surprised at how poor they actually were. I can't remember the chap's name, but there was one point in the game where there was literally a Hearts player standing on his own a Hibs player standing on his own in the Hearts penalty box, and the nearest Hearts player to him literally just turned his back on him. And for me, as a football fan, seeing that, if that had been a player for my team, I would have been absolutely livid. I mean, I was angry enough as it was, and I'm not a Hearts fan, because I don't think, if you're getting paid good money, for to do your job, do your job. I mean, let's be honest, if you turned up at work on Monday morning and decided, I can't be bothered today, your boss wouldn't be sitting in his office and watching you sitting about doing nothing. They'd probably come out and have a word with you, would they not?
I do that most weeks, to be fair, but they don't notice, so it's fine.
I thought you were going to refer me to Michael McEwen. I thought you were going to refer me to Michael McEwen there when I was talking about people not doing their job.
I hope he's not watching this. Sorry, I love you, Billy.
But yeah, I mean, the slide has been pretty spectacular, downwards for Hearts, absolutely. And yesterday, Hibs could definitely have scored more than the 1 goal. Kevin Nisbet probably could easily have had a couple himself.
Yeah, I mean, the first half, it was even, sort of a bit more possession without doing anything with it. But even then, Hibs had a couple of good chances. Eluan at the back post, decent save from Xander Clark. Eluan again, if he could shoot properly, could have had a couple of goals yesterday. It did. Hibs got the basics right. They got the ball over the top in behind Ewan and Nisbet, and Hearts couldn't deal with it. Kai Rolls and Toby Sibic were very poor defensively. But the second half, Hearts, Hibs again, goals in there. But in terms of Hibs, we spoke probably about a month when Hibs played Aberdeen, and it was El Sakio. Lee Johnson was in massive trouble. He turned it round, and then they went on the back of 4 straight defeats going into yesterday. Do you think, I mean, just in terms of looking at Hibs just now, 6th place just now, they're only a point ahead of Livingston. Lee Johnson, I'll get this up actually. So he said, I really enjoyed it. It was a performance marker in the manner we got the win against a good Hearts side. We're not in a position where we can be Barcelona, but our past battled, and that's what our fans want to see. It can't be one-off, though. There's got to be a consistency. I had a lump in my throat and a tear in my eye at the end because it felt, it's 3 points, but I felt like it's been a long time coming. It was a good, and we want many, many more. I mean, what have you made in terms of Lee Johnson this season? Have you been impressed with what he's done, or do you think that he maybe could do more with that Hibs team?
I think with the players that he has, I think he's done relatively well. The big problem for Hibs all season has been consistency. I've seen them in games when they've played very, very well. But from a defensive standpoint, they've been very slack. Offensively, they've been super. And I've seen them in games where they've not been that good, but they've managed to come through, and get the draw or get, just kind of scrape the win. I didn't think they would beat Hearts yesterday, I have to say. Straight away, I didn't think they would beat Hearts yesterday. At best, I thought it would be a draw, because lately Hearts do seem to have had the Indian sign on the derbies in Edinburgh. I don't think that one victory is going to turn that completely on its head. Obviously, the Hearts team were still, I'm loath to say it, but they were probably still trying to play the way Robbie Neilson had them playing before, he left the club. I don't think Naismith had enough time to, kind of like turn things around and get them playing, a different way. I don't know if Stephen Naismith could get them playing a different way, but that's why he's been given the opportunity, is to see if he can. And if so, can he then, save them? Let's be honest, they're looking at potentially just getting into Europe, and that will be the Conference League, depending on what happens with the Scottish Cup final. Because I don't see them getting third now.
Do you think that do you think that performance from Hibs yesterday, there's 6 games to go, does that have to be the benchmark for the rest of the season for them now?
Absolutely. I know once the split comes, this is where it gets a little bit strange, and I've always thought this when this SPL splits, because your top 6 teams, in theory, are going to be the best 2 teams in the league, who are obviously going to be first and second, and then the next 4 teams are teams that possibly could cause an upset. And I don't see any of the teams out with Celtic or Rangers causing an upset for Celtic or Rangers. I don't think. A few weeks ago, possibly, I might have had a different opinion because Hearts were doing so well. But now that they've sort of, I don't know how you would describe it, hit a brick wall, to use a terminology that often gets used by marathon runners, they've definitely kind of dropped out of it a little bit. They have to be looking over their shoulders and worrying about Hibs leapfrogging them, and possibly, dare I say it, maybe even Livingston.
Well, it's interesting because the last split, just the league table, Hibs are sitting 6th on 43 points, Mirren in 5th on 55, Hearts in 4th on 44, Hearts in 4th on 45, Livingston sitting 7th on 42. The game Hibs play are away to St John's next week shortly, and Livingston play Dundee United. Is there a chance that even after that win yesterday, still in the top 6 yet?
Yeah, I suppose possibly. I have to admit, I don't pay a lot of attention to teams outside of the big 4, shall we say, which would be Celtic, Rangers, in my opinion, Aberdeen, Hearts, and possibly Hibs would be in there. If Hearts weren't there, it would probably be Hibs. The rest of the teams, I don't see them ever getting into that kind of like top 4 scenario. But do you know what? Livingston are a team that you never know. They were on a bad run, and I didn't think they would beat St Johnstone yesterday. But boy, did they beat St Johnstone yesterday. Watching the highlights of that game as well, it was very much a case of, if Livingston had had that sort of spirit in some of the other games when they didn't do so well, they possibly wouldn't be, thinking, can we get into the top six? They might well have been like maybe fourth or fifth.
Yeah, let's unfortunately go on to talk about Hearts. Obviously, I've not had a chance to ask you yet. What was your thoughts on the sacking of Robbie Neilson last week as an outsider? Do you think that was the right decision? Do you think it was the wrong decision? What was your thoughts on that?
First of all, I was surprised when I heard it. I know they were on a bad run of results, and let's be honest, generally speaking, if a team's on a bad run of results, the manager's probably going to get the chop. But it was a bit like the Callum Davidson situation today. I asked myself, there's not many games left to play in the season. You're not going to bring in, like, in inverted commas, a big name between now and the end of the season. So you're going to have to rely on somebody who's, like, in Hearts' situation, Stephen Naismith, who is it the B team or the under 18s that he had been working with? He wasn't really part of the
B team.
He wasn't really like in the inner sanctum, if you like, of the first team coaching staff. So it's a great opportunity for Stephen Naismith, but I don't think come the end of the season, regardless of what happens, I don't think he will be, a strong candidate to be the manager of Hearts next season. I think they have to be thinking about bringing somebody in. But then it's a question of, where do they go and who do they get? We've seen this before with Hearts when they've got rid of managers. They haven't necessarily made the correct decision in the next man that they've brought in. On paper, it may have looked good, but in reality, it's not. And it's very difficult for any football club. It's very difficult, when, relatively speaking, a successful manager goes to bring in somebody else. And Robbie Neilson done well, in his 2 spells as the boss of Hearts, he did well, but for whatever reason, it just all collapsed on him over the last few weeks.
Yeah, I mean, just in terms of that game yesterday, I didn't really expect Naismith to change a lot. He's only had 4 days, but the one thing that worried me a little bit was the lack of fight and the lack of passion. You go into a derby game, it doesn't really matter how you play. It's about passion and the goal we lost as well. Now, I watched it back again. I don't know why I put myself through that, but I watched it back again, and it's just it's the same goal we lose every week. It's a corner kick, ball into the box. We don't defend it. And you mentioned a minute ago about players standing watching. Stephen Humphreys is standing in the box, picking up nobody. Kevin Nisbet runs off him and Atkinson, and it's the body language that worries me. The body language worried me about a few players yesterday. Didn't look interesting, didn't look up for it. And for me as a fan, that's not acceptable. And that's happened far too often for the last few weeks.
Yeah. I mean, I think if you ask any football fan, supporter, what's the minimum that they want from, players in their team, and it will be commitment. When you go out on there, you give 100%. If you don't win the game, we can forgive you for not winning the game. But, if you've given your everything. And there were players in that Hearts team yesterday who very obviously were probably thinking, oh, I wish I was on the beach at Ibiza. They were thinking about their summer holidays.
Stephen Naismith's comments, I don't think there was too much in it, but I didn't think we did enough to win it, and we didn't carry as much of a threat as I hoped in the final third. They are very direct. We dealt with that very well, except for one moment, and that's what cost you the draw. It's hard to take. We're a good squad, but I felt there was still the passing still there. But we've got another week to work on these things to make it better. The European spot hasn't been mentioned. I don't think it's that, to be honest. The squad, there hasn't been about third. If I was in that team today as a forward, I'd be frustrated because we never had that end part that you need to win games. You need to get back to winning ways. I don't want to be losing games. I fully expect us to pick up points. Now, something Naismith mentioned they are saying that
Right, it looks as if Graham's internet may have stalled or possibly crashed. I think this happened last week to him as well, if my memory serves me right. So, yeah, I would kind of agree that Stephen Naismith didn't have a lot of time to work with the players. And I can see how, as a forward himself, he would have been very, very frustrated and not getting anywhere with that game. And not getting the service that you would expect. And I think you could kind of see that with Lawrence Shankland. There were times for Lawrence Shankland when you could see that he was frustrated that he wasn't getting much in the way of service. So it's just going to be me waffling on by the look of things in the meantime, because we seem to have lost Graham altogether, which is a bit of a shame. We'll probably come back and talk about the Hearts. Oh, here we go. He's coming back again by the look of things. Argue with me, mother.
I think I'm back.
I was just waffling on there while you were gone. I was just saying that I could certainly agree with Stephen Naismith with his comment about, had he been a forward on the park, he would have been frustrated at the lack of service. And I think you could see at times Lawrence Shankland was the same. He was a wee bit frustrated that he wasn't getting the kind of service, because Lawrence Shankland is a player that if you give him the ball and he's in an area to hurt a team, he's going to hurt them. And that never happened, yesterday. And it certainly didn't happen enough yesterday to make it, a problem for Hibs. But I would like to think that, the Hearts players, I don't know what's going to happen, because obviously I don't have an in to the Heart of Midlothian Football Club, but I would like to think that, Stephen Naismith will maybe get those players in, maybe today, maybe tomorrow, and they're going to have to thrash out what it is that those players are wanting to do with the remainder of the season. Are they going to just give up altogether and lose the possibility of European football, or are they going to pull their socks up and start performing for the fans? Because that's what needs to be put to them.
I think the one thing I don't agree with Naismith, I keep saying Nielsen, when Naismith, the fact that he talks about the fact that they've not mentioned European football and he doesn't think it's a big deal. I disagree with that, because that's the whole reason that Nielsen was sacked in the first place, because we lost out on that third place. And again, I know that what managers say in the press doesn't matter, but if you're given that mindset that third place doesn't matter, and Naismith mentioned this a few days ago in his press conference where he says that he thinks players have coasted. Now, if I'm listening to that as a player, I'm thinking, well, third place doesn't matter. Believe me, the Hearts fans, it does. It matters a lot.
Oh, absolutely. And you know what? Having had a taste of Europe this season, you would like to think that the players, obviously the fans will, but you would like to think that the players would say to themselves, well, do you know what? We did reasonably well in Europe this year. Can we get into it for next year? And then, can we go that next step up? Because out with Celtic and Rangers, this is always the problem for Scotland. When you've got other teams playing in a Europa League or the Conference League now, they get a couple of games and then they go out, and it doesn't help, Whereas what they need to do is say, right, we've got in, we get into the group stages, right? But we didn't qualify from the group stages. So next season, we want to get back into the group stages of that competition, and we want to be able to qualify out of it. You might not get it for 2 or 3 seasons, but the more often that you get into the competition, the chances are that you're going to progress sufficiently enough to get out of that group stage and move on to the next step.
Do you think looking from outside, do you think that third place have now gone for Hearts, or do you think they can still get it?
If I'm being honest, I think they've lost third place. I think what they're going to have to rely on now is Celtic or Rangers winning the Scottish Cup and there being a space in the Conference League as a result of that. As I said a few weeks ago, I definitely would not have thought that Hearts would have thrown away that third place. Really wouldn't have. But it just goes to show you, as they say, football's a funny old game. And, I know you said a few weeks ago, that Hearts weren't doing particularly well, and you were getting worried as a Hearts supporter. You were getting worried about the situation. But looking at it, from the outside, I thought that they were, they'd be good enough to get themselves out of that slump, if you like. But I don't know. It's as if the world has fallen out of the bottom of their world, and they just seem lost.
Yeah, I can't disagree with that. Let's move on from that game now, because I'm both talking about Hearts. Let's go to Ibrox, and Rangers played St Mirren. It finished Rangers 5, St Mirren 2, which is very harsh for St Mirren because I thought they played well in spells. But Rangers had a chance early on after 5 minutes. James Tavernier had a penalty saved. Now, again, it didn't matter in the long run, but the penalty was given for a foul by Gogic on Raskin. And again, I think that's a long-run joke now that you think penalty Rangers. Did you think that was a penalty, or was that very harsh?
Again, I would have put it into the soft category. I think, having seen it a couple of times, I'm still undecided as to whether or not it was just inside the box or on the line. And I know if it's on the line, then technically it's a penalty. But I feel that it probably should have just been a free kick. But obviously, VAR would have had a look at it. And I know lots of people are going to have lots of opinions, about VAR, preferring, decisions for Celtic or Rangers and all the rest of it. And I don't want to go down that road. But yeah, I can see why it was given, and I can see why it became a penalty. But I like the penalty today. I think it was soft.
I mean, Rangers did eventually go ahead. 26 minutes gone. Todd Cantwell, a decent ball in from James Tavernier. Do you think St Mirren could have defended that a bit better?
Yes, and there's a very interesting point I want to make about this, because obviously there was a decision. Was it this particular goal? I can't remember now if it was this goal, but there was a goal, and I'm pretty sure it was Todd Cantwell, where they were having a look at it to see if there was an offside. And obviously the decision was given that it was possibly just onside. And I had been watching a Real Betis and Espanyol match before I saw the highlights of the Rangers St Mirren game. And there was a very similar incident in that game. And the VAR and the referee gave the decision against Espanyol and said that the player who scored, Brathwaite, was offside. But it was one of those ones, where they draw the line on the screen, and it's like, well, if he is offside, it's a hair on his leg kind of idea. And I think a similar situation there. And it just goes to show that, I know we lambast VAR here in Scotland because it's the first season we've been using it, and there is some terrible, terrible things happening with it. But it just kind of shows you that even in leagues where they have been using it for a wee while, you still have that potential for a contentious decision. But I think he probably was just onside. Watching it in real time, I thought he was off. But then when you see it back and you slow it down, yeah, he probably was just onside. So I can't really disagree with that.
Yeah, I mean, as probably expected, Rangers did have a lot of possession. They did have a few decent chances, but St Mirren did get level in 45 minutes, and what a goal from Mark O'Hara. Ball comes into the box. It comes off a Rangers defender. It's a brilliant first touch from his chest from O'Hara. And on the volley, he gives Alan McGregor absolutely no chance. And his 11th goal this season. And he probably won't score a better goal than that.
Yeah, absolutely. And do you know what? I think, I don't know if it would win goal of the season, But it's certainly got to be in amongst the final ones for, deciding what is going to be the best goal of the season in the Scottish Premier League. I've thought for a long time that Mark O'Hara is a player who could be playing at a club better than St Mirren. And I'm not necessarily saying Rangers or Celtic here. I'm talking about even down in England, maybe in the Championship in England or something like that, maybe League One. I wouldn't see him playing for a Premier League club at this point in time. But I think the boy has got the potential to go on and do very, very well. And I wasn't really surprised when he scored his goal yesterday, because I've seen him playing for St Mirren a couple of times this season, and I've always been impressed by him. He's got the right attitude for a young player, and he is still pretty much a young player.
I mean, it's the technique as well. To take that on his chest and then swivel and hit it on the volley. It's a brilliant finish and a great technique.
I know, and it's one of those goals, isn't it, whereby if you saw like somebody in the Premier League doing that, or you saw somebody in the Bundesliga or La Liga, or in Italy or whatever, if you saw one of these guys doing it, you'd be like, oh, what a fantastic goal, brilliant, what skill, but we don't do that here when we see a player in Scotland doing that. We don't kind of go overboard like that about it. We're just like, it was pretty good.
Well, what
you can't take it away that it was a superb piece of work. He created the goal for himself and he scored it, and it was wonderful.
It was. And what you can't really, Stephen Robinson must be really frustrated, because again at half time, 1-1, and you're probably saying to your team, right, just keep it tight second half. And after 3 minutes, you lose a really poor goal. Again, decent ball in from Barisic, but Sakala's got a free header. And it's a good header from Sakala, but it's really poor defending for St Mirren to start that second half.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, it's like, again, I hate to sort of keep harping on about Rangers and Celtic, but, out with Rangers and Celtic, the other teams in the Scottish Premier League, these are the things that they have to kind of guard against. If they get themselves in a good position, they go in at half-time, drawn, or maybe a goal up against, in inverted commas, a better team than them. That is when they need to, initially in the next half, consolidate, be a bit more savvy about what they're doing. And unfortunately, so often that doesn't happen, and they get punished because, let's be honest, again, Rangers have players who, on paper and in some instances, in reality, are head and shoulders above the St Mirren players. And therefore, you should expect that they should always beat somebody like St Mirren. But they got a fright, when St Mirren equalised, they got a fright. Don't get that wrong, And even when they got their second goal, St Mirren, it was still a shock for Rangers. But they showed their mettle, to come back and eventually win the game. And that's the difference between the likes of a St Mirren and the likes of a Rangers. That mettle to sort of pull your socks up and see the job through to the end.
Yeah, St Mirren eventually did crumble, but it would have been easy 2-1 down to just kind of go, well, that's us lost. But they did come back into it, 65 minutes gone. And again, it's another excellent finish from Mark O'Hara. Takes the ball on the outside of the foot, past McGregor. 12 goals this season for Mark O'Hara, which, let's be honest, for a team like St Mirren, is a very impressive goal haul for a midfielder.
Yeah, and again, as I said earlier, if you can kind of imagine him playing with a group of better players at a club, bigger than St Mirren, I think he probably would be scoring more goals a season, than 12. But it's up to the player, does he have the ambition to go on? And as I said, it doesn't necessarily have to be that he goes to Celtic or he goes to Rangers. If he was to go to Aberdeen, theoretically, Aberdeen are a better team than Hibs. So that should give him an improvement, Maybe not at this moment in time, but, the Hearts of a few weeks ago, if he was playing at Hearts of a few weeks ago, he'd be with better players than he would be with at St Mirren. So, potentially it's there for him to be a better player. But I honestly felt, to be honest, I didn't think St Mirren would score yesterday. I didn't think Rangers would get 5 goals, I have to say. But I didn't think that St Mirren would get 2 goals. I didn't think they would get any. I seen it as a kind of 1-0, 2-0 type scenario. So
Well,
I
I
take
was
my hat off
watching.
to them.
Yeah, I mean, I was watching Soccer Saturday, and when the goal went in for St Mirren and it was like 2-2, I thought, oh, bit of a surprise coming up here because St Mirren still had a chance, and they still do technically of getting third place. So you're thinking this could be a bit of a difficult, sticky bit for Rangers, but they did eventually manage to win the game. They managed to score basically 3 goals in the space of 6 minutes.
Yeah.
Alfredo Morelos scores the first again, poor defending again, really, from St Mirren, and then it just completely fell apart after that. Morelos scores again a minute later, and then Scott Arfield, who again is one of these players that I actually don't think gets a lot of credit. He's a guy that arrives in the box, he's the guy that does score goals, but again, he's someone that just can't seem to get a regular game at Rangers as Arfield. He's a very, very good player.
Yeah, I mean, I would agree with you. I think he's better than some of the players that get picked ahead of him, pound for pound. Why he doesn't play week in, week out, I don't know. But I remember him when he was at Falkirk, and you could see then that he was destined to go on to bigger and better things. And I must admit, when he signed for Rangers, I thought, oh my God, I don't really want him to be signing for Rangers because he's such a good player. Because let's be honest, as a Celtic supporter, you don't want to see your biggest rivals signing good players. And he has done very well for them. But like you say, he is one of those players that you have to keep an eye on. He might not be doing anything in the game, but he just needs that one opportunity for, the defence to take their eye off him, and he gets himself in behind, and most of the time he's going to score a goal if he's in a position to do so.
Alfredo Morelos now has 11 goals this season. It's, for him, not a massive amount of goals. I think I asked Michael on this last weekend that, do you think that if Rangers lose Morelos in the summer, which looks likely, it's going to be a massive loss to them?
No, I don't. I think the boy Cholak is better than him. I think Sakala is better than him. And I'm pretty confident that if he does go, which kind of looks as if it's more than likely it will happen, if he does leave Rangers in the summer, I'm sure they will be looking to bring in, a third striker. Now, whether or not he's somebody that can go straight in and start scoring goals, you never know until, that happens. But in all honesty, I've never really been that impressed by Alfredo Morelos. Even at the times when he was like the number one for Rangers, he was more of a liability than he was an asset in many, many games. You just need to look at the number of times he got himself sent off. And, I always referred to him as an angry wee man. I don't think I've ever seen him smile. In the years that he's been in Scottish football, I don't think I've ever seen him smile. I've seen him snarling plenty. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. But I don't know, he can score goals. And when he does play, he's a decent player. But I think Rangers could do better. And I think they've got better at the moment with Sakala and Cholak.
I mean, for Rangers now, obviously the title's really well and truly done. It was weeks ago. But now does focus have to turn to that semi-final against Celtic and trying to stop that treble?
Yes, but it's a double-edged sword, that. Because if they put too much emphasis onto it and they don't win it, from a supporter's point of view, it's a major disaster because they're getting nothing out of the season. The fact that they've made good progress through the season, especially once Michael Beale came in, and they've won consistently, but unfortunately for them, when they've been winning, Celtic have carried on winning as well, so they've not been able to chip away at that points difference. So in the summertime, Michael Beale gets in. Apparently, he has an idea of who he's going to be bringing in the summer. Apparently, they've identified the targets. So if he's bringing in the players that he thinks is going to, take them to the next level, then, that's what you should be concentrating on. Yes, hope that you win the semi-final and then get to the Scottish Cup final. Because if Rangers get to the Scottish Cup final, let's be honest, and no disrespect to the team that they're going to face, if they're not going to face Celtic in a final, then it's pretty much a stick-on that they're going to win the Scottish Cup. But it's a big, big game to hang your ambition on, you know. I honestly...
What did you make of...
What? No. What were you going to say?
I was going to say, what did you make of Rangers' performance in the Glasgow derby? Do you think they had that brilliant free kick from Tavernier, obviously the other goal that they got. Did you see anything in that Rangers performance that you think they could actually cause us problems in the semi-final?
Honestly, no. And the reason for that is quite simple. Celtic on that day were not very good, but they were still good enough to win the game. And I hate to say the old firm, in Celtic and Rangers games, it's a very fine margin, between the two teams, usually, when it comes down to who's going to win and who's not going to win the game. Because they're the top two clubs, in theory, the players should be of an equal standard, and therefore, quite a lot of the times they might sort of cancel each other out. So you would think that possibly there could be more draws in those games than, wins for either side. But what it comes down to, and I suppose it's the same in any derby game, what it comes down to with a derby game is on the day, who wants it? And even though Celtic weren't playing particularly well in the last derby, the players that Celtic had wanted that win more than Rangers, in my opinion. Now, a lot of people will probably disagree with me on that, and that's quite all right. I'm quite happy that people disagree with me on that. But I think if you look at it objectively, and even though I'm a Celtic supporter, I like to try and look at the games as subjectively as possible, and if Celtic were crap that day, I would quite happily say they were crap that day. They were off their game, but they were still good enough to win it. And the same thing happened in the League Cup. On that day, the Celtic weren't at their best, but they were still good enough to beat Rangers. And that's that very, very fine margin that there is between both of those teams. That on any given day, whichever team has the greater desire will probably win.
In terms of St Mirren, obviously disappointing for them yesterday, but they've had a very good season so far. They are sitting fifth. Probably will, I think, get the top six. What have you made of them so far this season? And does Stephen Robinson probably not get the credit he deserves?
Yes, he doesn't get the credit he deserves, I believe. When he was at Motherwell, I thought he was a good manager, and I thought he did well with Motherwell. But again, like so many teams, they go into a slump, and the manager is the guy who has to carry the can, let's be honest. Although a lot of the time it's the players that are at fault, but the manager's the guy who puts them out on the pitch. Therefore, he's the man that has to take responsibility ultimately. So when he left Motherwell, I was a wee bit disappointed because I was an admirer of his then. When he came back to St Mirren, I was a bit dubious when he came back to St Mirren, I have to admit, because I thought, I don't know, because Jim Goodwin had been very good for St Mirren, and I thought, I don't know if Stevens and Robinson is going to be able to kind of carry that on. But he has done, and in fact, he's probably taken them another step forward, that maybe Jim Goodwin couldn't have done. So, yeah, I don't see them coming out of the top six. Let's be honest. I don't think it's likely to happen to them. I know there's only the one more game before the split, but I think they're safe. Potentially, could they be in a position to get European football next year? Yes, but like I said before, that's for the Hearts players. That's for them to say, right, we don't want anybody else getting into that Europa Conference League slot. depending on what happens with the Scottish Cup final, because I honestly believe that Aberdeen are going to be in the Europa League. So it does come down to that Scottish Cup final. Who wins the cup determines, whether or not the fourth place team will get European football.
That was my next question, actually, because St Mirren are very much capable of getting that fourth place. Hearts have been, as we all know, on a massive slide. They play Kilmarnock next week, which they'll fancy winning. Hearts play Ross County, which I would like to think Hearts will win, but there's every chance St Mirren could get that fourth place. And if they do, Stephen Robertson will have done an incredible job.
Absolutely. And it should be seen as a successful season if that's the actual outcome. And even if he doesn't get European football, it's still a very good season, for him. And it then comes down to, can he move forward? Because, at the end of the day, every football club has to go one better, don't they? They have a great season. In theory, the season that follows should be better, right? That's the theory behind it. We know it doesn't work that way all the time, but that's how it should go. So he came into the club, he steadied the ship, he then steered them, into winning games and doing very well when they were winning some of the games. I remember when they played Rangers not long after he came in to the club. And I thought they were very, very good, St Mirren, in that particular game. Rangers were off the pace that day as well, but St Mirren, were very, very good. And they have done so pretty consistently since Stephen Robinson came into the club. They have been pretty consistent and, not necessarily winning all the time, but, even when they've maybe been behind, they've managed to come back in and, secure a draw and things like that. So, yeah, consistency. That's what he's brought to St Mirren. And if they get Europe, it's a bonus for them. But just to be in the top six at the end of the season will be a successful season.
Yeah, 100% agree. Let's move on now to, for me, what was the biggest surprise of the weekend. Motherwell 1, Dundee United 2 at Fir Park. Stuart Kettlewell's side have been on a good run. They took the lead through Kevin Van Veen, his 19th goal of the season, which is incredible. But United fought back a goal from Niskanen after 63 minutes and a penalty from Jamie McGrath fired Dundee United off the bottom of the table and up to third bottom. James, I don't think anybody could have seen that result coming.
No. I think if you asked anybody other than the most rabid Dundee United fan, they would have probably thought that Dundee United were going to go down this season. They probably still can go down. Obviously, the next few games are going to determine what ultimately happens with that. But there have been such a huge turnaround in their last two games that you've got to feel a wee bit of confidence for them going forward. When Motherwell went 1-up yesterday, I kind of thought to myself, oh, here we go. Dundee United had a brilliant game in the last game. They got a super win. But this is it, the step backwards. But they hung in there, and they kept battling and they kept fighting and they got the reward. Again, a penalty, possibly a soft one. He did bring him down, so yes, it was definitely a penalty. But it would be of the soft variety. The one that they didn't get after that, which Stephen Fletcher got booked for simulation, I felt was probably a stronger case for a penalty.
I'm going to get to that. Azulino, finally, where have you been, mate? He says, afternoon, gents, you're a little bit late. We've just finished talking about Rangers against St Mirren, so you're arrived a little bit late. But good to see you on, Azulino. It's always good to see you on. But, I mean, in terms of Motherwell, Kevin Van Veen, as I say, 19 goals, 8 in 5 games. Under Kettlewell, he has had a complete new lease of life. He's had guys like Mikel Mandron helping him out. He's had John Obuke helping him out. Again, I might be being a bit harsh here, and apologies to Motherwell fans that are watching. I don't think Van Veen will be at Motherwell next season because I think he's too good for Motherwell.
Yeah, I wouldn't necessarily disagree. And I wouldn't be surprised if he went somewhere else. I was actually reading something earlier today can't remember where it was I was reading it on, but somebody was saying that they thought that Van Veen could be the answer for Rangers if Morelos goes. And I kind of dismissed it. You know, when I first read it, I kind of dismissed it. But then I looked at it again and I thought, well, do you know what? It might be a good player for Rangers to have, because they would then have Čolak, Sakala and Van Veen. And I'll be honest with you, when he went to Motherwell, I had never ever heard of him. You know, so I didn't think, you know, a great deal about him. And I was surprised, you know, and he has come on to a super game and he's scoring some really good goals and his all-round play is very good as well. So I won't say he's the complete package, but he's definitely in there. And he's in his 30s now, I think, isn't he? Is it 31 or something? I think he is. So he's kind of a late bloomer, as they say, you know. His career is kind of blossoming late on, because usually, you know, when players get to their sort of 30s, that's when they're kind of tailing off a wee bit. But he seems to be thriving.
Yeah, I mean, Van Veen, they had a couple of decent chances, actually. He could have had a hat-trick. And there was a moment, I think it was the second half, still at 1-0 up, where he is flagged for offside. Now, again, I don't like the way that they draw these lines and stuff on to try and make it look like some of the offside. I thought that was very, very tight. And I'm actually not convinced he was offside, to be honest. I think it's very, very harsh.
Yeah. Again, it's like I said earlier, it was one of those situations where if he was offside, it was a hair on his leg, you know, that was offside. When the margins are as tight as that, personally, I think the decision should go with the attacking team. I know a lot of people will disagree with me and say that, you know, no, you've got to give the decision to the defending team. But I think it should go with the team that's got the momentum. But you know what? It's not me that's making those decisions, you know, and the people that are making them, you would like to think more often than not we'll get them right. But you do see sometimes, you know, some weird things. The thing that really gets me actually is that they hold the flag down when it's so obvious when a player's offside. You know, the flag should be up straight away, you know. And if the linesman can't see that he's offside at that point, when he runs on another 2 yards and potentially scores a goal and then they flag up, what's the point in that? Because they must have known he was offside to begin with. You know, and I think this is where technology is kind of taken over a little bit, that referees and linesmen, they're kind of relying on the technology and the person who's, you know, sort of watching the video back. You know, years and years ago, yes, we would all disagree when the linesman or the referee gave a decision against our team, because that's the natural order of things. But there are times, and you've probably seen it yourself, you know, I've seen it when I've been watching games, where I feel that the referee has been influenced by the person who's looking at it in the VAR room, whereas the referee's allowed something to stand, but then they get told, no, it's no. And rather than sticking by their decision, they're like, oh, wait a minute, let's go and have a wee look on the monitor. And don't forget, the person in the VAR room's still in their ear at the time they're watching that on the monitor. We don't hear what's being said. So, you know, are they saying to them, look, see, I told you, you know, he was offside there. That goal shouldn't stand. We don't hear that. And that's part of the reason why the whole thing happened with Andy Walker, you know, where he said that they had heard, you know, the referee in the game's been told by the people in the VAR room that they had to change their mind. And that, we know the problems that caused the other week.
Yeah, we've got a comment from As We Know. It's weird though. Hang on. It's weird though. Was a hand always offside back in the day? I'm sure it used to be a torso and feet, and if you were close, it went in favour of the attacker. Maybe I'm tripping. At the moment, the natural lean of each player means the attacker is offside, even if the feet and hips are totally in line. And something you mentioned earlier on, James, about the fact that these assistant referees that don't put the flag up till too late, that's annoyed me for ages, because at some point, someone's going to get injured doing that. If you don't put the flag up, somebody runs through, then you put the flag up, a keeper, a defender might come in and smash somebody, and it's offside. I just think get the flag up when it's pretty obvious. Get that flag up. I've never agreed with that. I don't know why they brought that in.
Yeah, I mean, you won't remember this, and maybe some people will remember this. I can certainly remember this. They did an experiment back in I think it was the mid-1970s to the late 1970s, where the offside rule was that the 18-yard line was extended. So the penalty box, 18-yard, was extended right across the pitch. And the offside rule at that point was if you were inside that line, you were offside. Didn't matter if there was a defender in there with you, you were offside. You had to be not goal side of that line to be onside. And I think it was the League Cup here in Scotland that they experimented it with. Back then it wasn't called the League Cup, it was called something else. The Dryborough Cup or something, I think, if my memory serves me right. And they tried it for, I think it was a season, maybe 2 seasons. And it was very obvious, when an offside decision was being given, that the guy was offside. And then everybody was quite happy about it. But then they decided that, no, that's not such a good idea. So they've done away with it. And they've been tinkering with the offside rule ever since, and they don't seem to get it right. And I completely understand why people get confused, as a player offside, as a player onside. Because very often it used to be that you had to be between the goal and the defender and you were offside. And then it was if you were leaning just past the defender, you were offside. Now, in some games, the guy's offside when he's in line with the defender, depending on the view of, the linesman or whatever. So that there is no real definitive that I can see. I'm sure going by the rules, there probably is a definitive, but the interpretation of it, people just seem to kind of make things up a wee bit as they're going along.
Yeah, well, United got back in the game, as I said. Niskanen gets his first goal of the season, and then United managed to go in front. Jamie McGrath's penalty. Now, I agree with what you said earlier on. I think Liam Kelly, it is a foul. He goes in a bit late. Stephen Fletcher does use his experience and does well. Decent penalty from Jamie McGrath down the middle. But I think the second one, where he gets a booking for a dive, I don't see what's different with that one. I think they're both penalties to me.
Yeah, and see, to be honest, I think I might be wrong, but I think what's probably happened there is the referee has known, right, I booked the goalkeeper. Now he's brought him down again. If I give him another yellow card, the goalkeeper goes off. And he does go down a little bit theatrically, Fletcher, let's be honest. So that's made it quite easy for the referee to say, right, well, okay, he's dived. And then I don't give the penalty. I could be wrong with that, but that's how I see that. The referee's not wanting to give the goalkeeper a second yellow. Because, pretty late in the game, wasn't it? So, let's try and, in inverted commas, be a wee bit fair on this one. Had it been like maybe the first one had been in the first half, and then it happened again, then there's probably more of a chance that the goalkeeper might have got a second yellow and got put off. But I think personally the second one was more of a penalty than the first one. That's my own opinion.
This is where I'm really confused about VAR, right? Because now, in the end, it didn't matter. United won the game anyway. But the thing that I don't like is, why is Nick Walsh not being asked to go to the monitor and check that for his own opinion? Because if he gives that as a dive, he has to be 100% sure that's a dive. Mm-hmm. Why not go and look at the monitor and just see if I've got that right or not? This is what I don't like with VAR, because some referees are using it, some aren't. So why is he not being asked to go and look at that? That's what I don't get.
Yeah, well, the thing with VAR, right, it's meant to be if it's a clear and obvious error. Now, by that, my take on that is that the person in the VAR room has to believe that it has been a clear error that has been made by the referee, and therefore they say, right, come and have a wee look at this on the monitor. They shouldn't then be saying anything else to the referee. He watches it. And if he wants to then ask for a second or a third opinion, Sorry, I apologise for starting to laugh there. Just a comment from Azolino. Azolino put up on the screen there. By the way, nice living room, James. Are you a pianist? Say it carefully. I always say pianist carefully. No, the piano is just there for show. It's actually Bella the Dug that plays, but that's another story altogether. I digress. Let's get back to what we were talking about. So, as I said, when the referee's looking at it, there shouldn't be anybody speaking to him, and if he then decides on a second viewing on the monitor, yeah, I have made a mistake, and then, right, it's a penalty and therefore another yellow card and the goalkeeper goes off. But I might be wrong, but I think that the guy in the VAR room is chirping away at the referee in his earpiece when he's watching these monitor things. And he's either saying, no, you can let that go, or no, you have to penalise that. And that would be wrong. But in that instance, I think what's probably happened is that they've decided that the referee was right not to give the penalty, just purely based on, the fact that it might have meant a red card for the Motherwell goalkeeper. But I could be wrong with that. But then we'll never know, will we? Because they're never going to get the opportunity to come out and tell us.
No. But in terms of Dundee United, I mean, it's only their second away league win of the season. They are now off the foot of the table. Again, when Jim Goodwin got the job, a lot of folk were maybe not convinced. What have you made so far of what he's done in a short space of time for United?
Yeah, he's done really well. And do you know what? I think it comes down to, I think the players at Dundee United are giving him what the players at Aberdeen weren't. And I think it's as simple as that. And I think the players at Aberdeen are giving Barry Robson what they weren't giving Jim Goodwin. And that's why Aberdeen have been doing so well of late. And it really does come down to, how that relationship between the manager, coach, whatever you want to call them, and the players is. And I've heard, I don't know if there's any truth in it, but I've heard stories, of there being quite a lot of unrest in the Aberdeen camp when Jim Goodwin was the manager there. I've heard people saying that folk thought he was a bit of a, it's my way or the highway kind of thing. And maybe with the players at Dundee United, that attitude, if it's true, actually works. But again, we don't know what's happening in the dressing room, let's be honest. We can only speculate. And, but I think it's down to the players. The players have responded to Jim Goodwin at Dundee United, whatever it is that he does with them on a day-to-day basis, whereas the players at Aberdeen didn't respond to him. And ultimately it cost him his job up at Aberdeen and might well get him the job full-time at United.
In the two games in the SWPL that kicked off a bit later, it's currently Glasgow City Women 0, Celtic 1, and it is also, I think I saw a goal coming through earlier on as well, it's Glasgow Women 0, Dundee United 1. So Celtic are ahead in that big game between Glasgow City Women and Celtic. In terms of United, do you think they can get out of this relegation battle? They are at home to Livingston next week. Do you think Jim Goodwin can get United out of this, or are they potentially going to go down?
If they win against Livingston, I think they'll stay up. If they draw or lose to Livingston, then it will be the playoffs. Might not be automatic relegation. I think it will be the playoffs. I think Ross County are probably the team that will automatically go down.
Yeah, I kind of agree with that now. I've had United going down a while ago, but now I'm just not entirely sure. It's now Glasgow and Dundee United 2 in that game. And the thing is as well, I was reading this earlier on about Glasgow, and I'm sorry to go off a tangent here, but they've now played 28 games and they've now conceded 122 goals, which just sounds mental. But Glasgow, and I kind of feel sorry for them. They've not won a game yet. They've not got a single point. And already early on, they're 2-0 down against United.
Well, you know what? I know it's disheartening, right? When you play and you lose heavily. Doesn't matter whether you're playing the men's game, the women's game, whether you're a child or whatever. It's disheartening if you're in a team and they lose badly in a game of football. It's the courage to go back to the next game. That's what defines that team for me. And if they survive to go in to play next year they will only get better. And that's what they have to think to themselves. Even though we get beat 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, whatever it is, we have to take lessons from that, and we have to try and improve. I don't watch a lot of the women's football, I have to admit. I tend only to watch Celtic, Rangers, Hearts, Hibs games. I don't really watch any of the other ones. In fact, I'm looking forward to the Hearts Hibs derby on Sky next week, in the women's game. But I think if the Glasgow City women's team, are around next year, I think they'll be better, and hopefully they'll be a wee bit tougher. They might still get beat quite heavily in some games, but hopefully they'll have learned enough to, improve and move forward, because I think they need as many women's teams as possible, because I'm a great advocate of the women's game. Although I don't watch it regularly, I'm a great believer in, getting that game developed, and them getting them onto the TV more often, which actually brings me to an important point. Again, kind of going off on a tangent here slightly. Obviously, the Hearts and Hibs game yesterday, the men's game, right, wasn't being shown live on TV, right? So you had to pay to, I think it was Hibs TV, wasn't it? But it would have been, because it was at Easter Road, to pay, I think it was $12.99 or something like that to watch it through their portal, right? But then last night, BBC Alaba showed the whole game from start to finish. Now, my question is, if BBC Alaba have got TV cameras there and are recording the game from start to finish, why don't they show it live as it happens?
It's a fair point, and to be honest, I'd rather watch, even though I don't speak Gaelic, I'd rather watch the Gaelic commentary than the Hibs commentary, to be honest, and that's just me being biased, obviously. But yeah, I
don't know if
I kind of agree with that. But Hashbury Stumbles made a few.
I don't know if this was the case yesterday or not, but I was watching one of the Scotland women's game on BBC Alaba, and you had the option to have the commentary in English or Gaelic. So, they could do that. If they were showing that game live, they could have given people the option, But it's just, to me, it just seems really strange that if they're showing the game later on in the evening from start to finish, a full 90 minutes or 90 plus minutes, why don't they just show it live? Is it going to cost them much more to do so?
I wouldn't have thought so. Generally wouldn't have thought so. Yeah. Hashbury Stumbles made quite a few comments here. So Jags women did well to be top 6 in the second season, even though they got cuffed by Rangers today. I prefer watching the women's game now. And Hashbury Stumbles said, you can choose the language on the red button. So I might have to do that next time there's a game on Alba. But just in terms, and it's actually now, I feel like Jeff Stelling, it's now Dundee United 3-0 up on Glasgow Men at the moment, and it's very early on that game, so it's looking another hammer for the Glasgow Men. But in terms of Motherwell, I think Stuart Kettle's done a very good job. They're sitting in 8th just now. They're not going to get top 6. But Stuart Kettle, I think, will be very happy with what he's done so far. They go to Celtic Park next week. No, but a decent season so far for Stuart Kettle since he's come in.
Absolutely. Again, if you think about where they were when he took over in, was it January, February, I think it was, wasn't it, when Stuart Kettlewell got the chance to do this. They have done very well. And that is, that whole thing about the new manager bounce. That's a classic example of it with Motherwell, because essentially it's the same group of players. There may be some younger players or whatever are getting an opportunity, that didn't get the opportunity before. But they're essentially the same group of players that were dealing with the previous manager. But this new manager has come along and they've given him absolutely everything. And I think at one point, potentially, Motherwell could have been in a position where they were likely to go down. But he came in, steadied the ship, actually did a bit better than just steadying the ship. And they find themselves in the position that they're in. As you said, they're not going to hit top 6, but, they're definitely not in any danger of relegation.
Well, we have 2 games to go, and let's look at Livingston against St Johnstone. We'll get to St Johnstone in a wee second, and it's now Glasgow and Northern United 4. Livingston won by 2-0. Joe Nubley getting his 7th goal of the season and a wonderful free kick from Stephen Kelly after 30 minutes. Livingston on a poor run, but we'll get to St Johnstone very shortly. But that's a massive, massive win for David Martindale, who, let's be honest, James, has been under a bit of pressure recently.
Yeah, again, I'm not a fan of Livingston, how they play football. They're a very old-fashioned team in some ways for me. Quite often they lump the ball up the park, hit and hope, as they used to say. Can it, James, you play as a team tune on that lovely piano? Like I said earlier, Hashbury, it's actually Bella the dog that plays the piano. It's not me. But yes, it was a very important win for them yesterday. Very important one. David Martindale, we've discussed him, on this show a few times when I've been on, and I'm not a huge fan of his, I have to admit. But he's done very, very well with essentially what is a group of journeyman footballers, and they pull out results when they need to. Nubley's goal yesterday was really good, really good. And for a big guy, you wouldn't expect him to score a goal like that. It just looks like somebody that you're going to lump the ball up the park to. He's going to knock it down to, his co-striker or whatever, who's going to be smaller than him, and you don't really see him, scoring goals with his feet like that. But he's been a bit of a revelation when I've watched him playing. He does actually play quite well. I don't think it was a free kick for the second goal. I think it was a very soft award. It was a good free kick that resulted in the goal, I have to say that. But I don't think it was a free kick to begin with. Looks like Graham's having trouble with his...
Yeah, Joe Nubley, again, I think I might have mentioned it. I think I'm here. Am I? Can you hear me?
Just about.
Anyone hear me?
Aye, we can hear you just about. You were going to say something about Joe Nubley.
You got me. Yeah, in terms of Joe Nubley, in terms of Nubley, I'm a massive fan of him, and I have said already that I believe that he might be signing for Hearts next season. I don't know if that'll happen or not, but that was a massive result for Livingston, and as well, Livingston could still potentially get top 6. They're only a point behind Hibs. A massive game next week against United, where Hibs are away to St Johnstone. Next week's a massive, massive week for Livingston.
Yeah, absolutely. In some ways, it is a season-defining week for them. Win, and they're still in the mix, so to speak, depending on what happens with the teams round about them. Lose, then, they're sliding back towards that trap door, shall we say. But no, I think Livingston are going to be relatively safe. I don't really see them going backwards and ending up in that sort of tail end of the table dogfight.
In terms of St Johnstone, for anyone who doesn't know, Callum Davidson was relieved of his duties, apparently by mutual consent, earlier this afternoon. They've had 3 straight losses, no wins in 6. They've only had 2 wins in the calendar year, and they've only scored 1 goal in 5. They were in a relegation battle last season. They're back in one now. James, there's only 6 games to go. Are you surprised that St Johnstone are basically pushed the panic button now with 6 games to go?
Yeah, I think they could have easily just waited until, the end of the season and dealt with whatever the result was, and if they went down, then fair enough. The reason that we're getting rid of the manager is we've been relegated and we need new blood, etc., etc. My understanding is that Stephen McLean, who is Callum Davidson's assistant at the moment, is the person that's going to be taking the team forward. Is he going to be able to prevent them from sliding further? Only time will tell. But I personally feel that Callum Davidson should have at least been given to the end of the season to determine, what's going to happen. I mean, it was announced that it was a mutual decision, which generally is just a gobbledygook for saying, that he jumped before he was actually pushed. And I get where the chairman has come out and said, that, we have to think in terms of the team. I completely understand that. But do you know what? Where's the loyalty? It wasn't that long ago that he got them the League Cup and the Scottish Cup. Yes, they had a bad season last season and they escaped from relegation by the skin of their teeth. And yes, potentially this season is looking like it's going to be the same thing. But if he gets them, if he was still there and he gets them out of going down, it's still been well done. And then they can think about changing the manager in the summer. But let's not forget that they sold a couple of brilliant players, St Johnstone, but they never replaced them. So I don't know who made the decision about selling those players. I'm assuming it wasn't the manager. So, the guys in the boardroom who make those decisions have to bear some of the brunt of the blame.
You mentioned a word there that I was going to actually say as well. Have you read my script? Because I was going to talk about loyalty. Because as you mentioned, Davidson's won 2 cups in the COVID Cup season. They won the League Cup and the Scottish Cup. Does that prove that there really is no loyalty and sentimentality in football?
See, to be honest, I don't think there's been loyalty in football for many, many years now. Both from a player's perspective and from a club's perspective. Because, I remember as a youngster growing up, and you had players who played with the same club they went in when they were like 16 and they played their entire career at that one club and they never ever went anywhere else. And that was all about loyalty. It was got nothing to do with anything else. But then they weren't getting offered the kind of money that they get offered nowadays. And let's be honest, again, money talks, I don't really blame a player who goes and signs for, say, a lower Premier League club or a Championship or a League One club down in England when they're getting 2, 3, 4 times what they're earning in the Scottish Premier League. I don't blame them for that. It's a short career. They should be making as much money as possible. But I'm a great believer in loyalty. I always have been, And if I have to admit, though, if I was a young man nowadays, I probably would be swayed, if I was playing football and I was earning £100 a week and somebody said to me, right, come and play for us and you'll get £200 a week. I probably would go and play for the team that's going to give me £200.
Here's a question that I saw on, obviously, my Hearts chat that I do on WhatsApp and on Twitter as well. Robbie Nielsen's at a job now. Could he get that St Johnstone job?
Well, do you know, it's funny you should say that because I was reading something the other day about the potential contenders for Robbie Nielsen's job at Hearts. And obviously, whenever a manager loses his job, the media always come up with, 4 or 5 potential candidates, who could step in. And yes, I think Robbie Nielsen would be in there as a potential manager for St Johnstone. It's a question of whether or not Robbie Nielsen would want to go to St Johnstone. Could he make them a better team? These are the questions that they have to be asking themselves, and the clubs have to ask themselves as well. I've always felt that if a manager has failed at a particular club and then suddenly gets straight in with another club, has the club that he's then gone to really done their homework? Are they not asking themselves, well, do you know what? He gets sacked from that last lot because he nearly got them demoted out of the league. Do we really want somebody like that running our club?
It's a bit like the whole Chelsea situation. They sacked Graham Potter and bring back Frank Lampard, who, let's be honest, was an absolute shocker. They brought him back, and they've not won since he came back in. I just don't get that at all.
Well, do you know what? I was very surprised when Graham Potter got the Chelsea job. And I don't know if I don't know if I mentioned it to you guys, but I know I definitely mentioned it to somebody at the time. I didn't think that he would last as Chelsea manager, because he didn't have any experience of dealing with big players, for want of a better expression. And the players that were at Chelsea, he didn't really sign. You know what I mean? So it was kind of doomed from the start, almost. Don't get me wrong, if he had been a huge success at Chelsea, I would have been quite happy for the man, but I really didn't see it happening. Frank Lampard, the first time he was with Chelsea, I thought it was quite a good appointment, because I thought he could do well for Chelsea. It didn't work the way that it was meant to. It didn't work for him when he went to Everton. And now that he's back at Chelsea, I think he's there as a scapegoat. And it's from a Frank Lampard point of view, it doesn't really matter what happens, because he can't be blamed for them being in the position they're in the league, because it wasn't his fault. He's only come in the last couple of weeks. Can he be blamed if they're getting punted out of Europe and they're not in Europe next year? I don't think he can. So, you know, from a Frank Lampard point of view, in a way, it's a win-win situation, because, you know, nobody can really hang the blame on him for that. But I was surprised when he got the appointment. And I don't know if it was you that I'd said to, it might have been Michael that I said to, was that the reason why Frank Lampard was in the stand that night at the game? You know, when he was in the stand, and that was the night where Graham Potter got the punt. And then the next thing you know, Frank Lampard's the man in charge. So had they already decided that was the situation, I think probably they had.
Yeah, Hashbury stumble. There's no job security as a football manager, which I agree with. Latest scores in the SWPL, it's now Glasgow City women 0, Celtic 2, and it's Glasgow women 0, Dundee United 5, and there's still a long way to go in that game. But in terms of St Johnstone now, as I say, they are sitting on 32 points. They're in ninth. Do you think there's a potential for St Johnstone to get dragged into this relegation battle with 6 teams to go?
Yes, is the simple answer to that. I think Callum Davidson possibly could have kept them out of it. Generally speaking, their home form's okay. It's been on the road where they've really struggled. And I think Callum Davidson probably could have steered them till the end of the season and kept them in the Premier League. With that change now, who knows? I mean, I like St Johnstone. I used to live in Perthshire, and I used to go and watch St Johnstone when I lived in Perthshire, because I'm a great believer in supporting your local team. Although Celtic was always my team, I didn't live in Glasgow. I travelled to watch the local team, and that's just my opinion. So I used to go and watch St Johnstone, and I remember seeing them playing in Europe when they were up against a team that had a very young Thierry Henry playing for them in European competition many moons ago. So I've always had a bit of a soft spot for St Johnstone. And even before I lived in Perthshire, when I was growing up as a boy, I always liked to see how St Johnstone were doing. I don't know why, but they were just one of those teams, you know. Sometimes there's a team that for whatever reason you always want to see them doing well. You've not got any connection to them, but you just quite like the idea of seeing them doing well. And St Johnstone were a team that I always wanted to see doing well. So I would hate to see them coming out of the Premier League, but I think, again, next game is big. Next game is massive for them. And in all honesty, I don't see them winning their next game. So, yes, I think they're going to end up in that, right on that trap door, you know, just kind of dancing around, waiting for the spring to go and see whether they fall through.
In terms of Livingston, do you think they'll get top 6?
Sorry, say that again.
In terms of Livingston, do you think they'll get top 6 that last game before the split next week?
No, I don't think so. I think they'll be in the bottom half of the table come the split. But I don't see them getting dragged into a relegation dogfight. But I don't think they'll make the top 6. Good luck to them if they do, but I don't think they will. I think they've had too many inconsistent results, and at the end of the day, in football, consistency is king. Whether you're inconsistent all the time, it's still a form of consistency. But the best teams, the teams that do relatively well, are the teams that are consistent week in, week out, winning, getting good draws, that kind of thing.
Yeah, absolutely. The final game of the weekend was the first game of the weekend. It was in Dingwall, and it was Ross County 0, Aberdeen 1. Aberdeen, again, Duke with his 16th goal of the season. Ross County, again, put up a decent fight. Aberdeen maybe not at their best, but another massive, massive victory for Barry Robson's men.
Yeah, absolutely. And I watched the game on Friday night. I didn't realise it was actually on TV because, normally on a Friday night we watch the BBC Scotland channel, and it's the Championship games that are on a Friday night. You don't often get Scottish Premier League games on TV on a Friday night. So I was quite surprised when I discovered it was on, but I watched it, and I have to say I was rooting a wee bit for Ross County. I must admit that. I was kind of rooting for them. But I wasn't really that surprised but again, Barry Robson got, a tremendous performance and result. As I said earlier, from a team of players who essentially are the same guys that, for whatever reason, didn't do it for Jim Goodwin. But you know what? They are working their socks off. Whether it's to get Barry Robson the job full time or not, I don't know. Whether it's they've suddenly got some professional pride back again, but they're definitely doing their damnedest to do well. And probably, if you go back to the Scottish Cup game when they lost out and they got put out of the Scottish Cup, probably at that point, a lot of those Aberdeen players were maybe thinking, "Oh well, let's just get to the end of the season," But now they seem to have that professional pride again, where they're thinking, yeah, this being in third spot, this is definitely, it's in our grasp now, and we don't want to give it up. And I don't think they will give it up.
Well, their last 6 games for Aberdeen, they have got 18 points. They've scored 11 goals, and they've kept 5 clean sheets, which is a remarkable turnaround for Barry Robson. And let's be honest, I have to say this as well. I think it's Aberdeen's place to lose now, that third place. I think they look very, very good now, and I think they probably will get third place, unfortunately for me.
Well, like I said, as I said to you at the start of the show, if somebody had said to me, 4 or 5 weeks ago that Hearts would be, a team that would not be the third finishing team in the Scottish Premier League this season, I would have laughed, because Hearts had been the team to sort of beat in that respect. Again, no idea why it's all gone wrong for them, but they have let it slip in a huge, huge way. I honestly think that from a player's perspective, they shouldn't be looking around and saying, well, do you know what, it was Robbie Nielsen's fault. They have to take some of the responsibility on themselves, because I know, based on some of the things you've said on the WhatsApp group, and I've seen some of your comments on Twitter and stuff like that, from a fan's perspective, I can see how a lot of the Hearts fans, like yourself, are saying, that the players are not doing what they're supposed to do. A lot of them, like yourself, didn't particularly like that, Robbie being the manager, although you could see at times, what he was trying to do, but ultimately, he kind of regressed, shall we say. But yeah, I think the players are going to have to hold their hands up, and take a lot of responsibility for losing third place. And we seem to have lost Graham again. His internet has gone. Oh, no, he's back again. I think he just does that to try and upset me.
Oh.
Yes, you're back.
I can't wait for the show to finish because the internet's just been that thing of the day. But you mentioned Dylan about Ross County. You think they're going to go down?
Yeah.
Still convinced that Ross County are going to go down? Their last game before the split. Well, they come to Tynecastle.
Yeah. No, I think Ross County are. I think they're through the trap door already. It's just a question of who's going to end up in that playoff position. Although in saying that, I mean, let's be honest, while I still expect Hearts to beat Ross County next week, if they didn't, it wouldn't be a major shock for me. But I do honestly think that Ross County are down. I'd love it if I'm proved wrong, obviously, but I don't think I will be. I like Dingwall. The folk up there are really nice. Who's coming up? No me, that's for sure. I can't manage the stairs at my age.
I have to say right now, I think it might be Dundee, although nobody seems to want to win that championship because Queen's Park fell off a cliff. Dundee only drew yesterday. I do think it might be Dundee that come up, to be honest, although I want Queen's Park to come up.
Well, do you know, it's funny you should say that because a few weeks ago I thought Queen's Park definitely could be there. But then they've gone on a wee run of late where it's not been quite so good for them. Dundee are certainly the consistent team. It's a bit like last season, you know, everybody kind of thought that Arbroath were the boys. And it didn't quite work out for them. And then this season's been an absolute nightmare for Arbroath. And I kind of expected them to kick on this season and possibly again be, you know, there or thereabouts. But like I said earlier, that championship is such a hard league. There are some very, very good teams in there. You know, I've watched some of those championship games and I've thought to myself, that's actually better than watching the SPA, the Scottish Professional Premier League. You know, so yeah, Dundee, I would probably agree with you.
There was a controversial. I was going to say that there was a controversial incident in the Aberdeen game on Friday night where Graham Shinnie was sent off for a high challenge on Jack Baldwin. I've heard a lot of folks say it's not a red card. Some folks say it was a red card. What was your take on that? Because he does win the ball, but he does leave one on Jack Baldwin.
On initial viewing of it, he definitely does get the ball, and it's the follow through that catches the player. So a yellow card, absolutely. I was a little bit surprised that it was sent to VAR and it came back as being a red card. So I can kind of see why it was given as a red as well. But I think the fact that he takes the ball and carries through on the player should mean that it was only a yellow.
Yeah, Hashbury stumble. I'm rooting for Queen's Park and Partick Thistle. Again, Partick have a decent run as well. They've looked very, very good. They could easily still get up. That's why I've said numerous times, I think the Championship is one of the best leagues in Scotland because it is so competitive.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's the funny thing, you know, when you think about it, some of the teams that are in the Championship historically have been in the top league. You know, so in theory, you know, there's no reason why they shouldn't be in the top league. But it just, again, it comes down to that whole thing about, you know, what kind of money can be input into the club. And can that money then be spent wisely in a squad that can help to retain, you know, the places for them? Because let's be honest, I mean, okay, Rangers got put out under totally different circumstances, but, you know, Hibs and Hearts have gone down in recent years and, you know, managed to, you know, navigate their way back up again. So why shouldn't the likes of Partick Thistle? And I would love Queen's Park to get up there, just purely because I live quite close to where they play as well.
Yeah, well, we have had a very quick 2 hours. It's very, very busy. My internet might last another couple of seconds. It just remains for me, again, to thank my wonderful sidekick, James Elliott. Again, you can listen to James E on Thursday night for his Your Country show at 7 till 9. And again, next Saturday on his big Saturday show from 10 till 12. We are back on the Locker Room next Friday. Michael should be here next week, but if he's not, I'm here. What more do you need? So thank you to all your comments again. It's been great. It's another busy show, and we shall see you again next week. Bye-bye.